Hey, welcome everybody to lesson 7, which is a lesson that I was going to do a little bit later, but I decided it kind of needed to go here. Calling it evolutionary astrology, which is actually kind of a Western term from some Western books. Raymond Merriman originally coined the term. But it's kind of, I was giving my conference talk last week, and Shanti kept saying, I really love your evolutionary astrology approach. And I don't know if I had really been totally familiar with that term, but it's just something that I do, which is kind of looking at, as I always kind of share with you, it's like Groundhog Day. You have some afflicted planets, and you have blind spots, and you have some negative tendencies, and how many lifetimes do you go through until you work out the positive sides of the planet? Jupiter, when it's afflicted, can be greedy and judgmental. You know, when it's, strong, it just has good judgment, is, a great teacher, and, just kind of unconditionally loving. So it's, I think, in understanding the soul charts, we have to kind of go back to kind of looking at the qualities, the blind spots and the darker qualities that kind of block the soul. So that's what this lesson is for. And we could spend, I've taught this in all my courses. I'm just doing a quick review of some of this material from some of my new students, and even for me and my older students, I think it's good to kind of go back there. It looks like we have a good crowd today after Thanksgiving. Hope you all had a good Thanksgiving. And let's start with some chanting. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Vakritunda Mahakaya, Suryakoti Samaprapa, Nirigam Gurame Deva, Sarvakareshi Sarvada, Jnanamulam Guru Murti, Pujamulam Guru Padam, Mantramulam Guru Vakyam, Mokshamulam Guru Kripa. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityoma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti 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 Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavatitam Ma Vivishai Om Shanti 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 Om Aditya Samaye Mangalai Buddhaya Cha Guru Shri Krishna Nibhischara Have Ketave Namaha. Honoring the great ones, Lord Krishna, Goddess Saraswati, Vedvyasa, my spiritual tradition, all my great judges, teachers, and welcoming Bill. And Affy's here, and Elizabeth said she couldn't come today. I don't know if she came or not. No. Catherine's here. Christina is usually doing massages. Natalia's here. Alice is here. Nadine is usually in, I don't know what she does, but she's been watching tapes. Good to, and Maria is here, I think. Yeah, Maria's here. Great. Okay. So we're in class 7. We're moving to class 8 on Gemini Karkancha Navamsha. I had postponed this lesson because I've taught it 2 or 3 times, and I'm going to send you some of the older tapes to listen to. There's a lot of cookbook stuff in this material. There's a lot of quotes from the Vedas, when you have these configurations in the Karkamcha Navamsha chart, you're afraid of snakes, or, I mean, there's all kinds of slokas from the Vedic text. And I've been trying to modernize it and summarize it and synthesize it so that we can sometimes it's a matter of grasping some of these deeper principles so that you can remember them. So that's my goal, but I will send you, I probably have 2 older tapes on this material, and you should watch them because that will give you an overview, and then I don't have to repeat the material. So I'll send those, today or tomorrow, and you can start watching them. We really should spend 2 weeks in Karakamsha and Devamsha, and by giving you the extra tapes, we can maybe, just have to spend 1 week of summarizing and synthesizing. And then the Karakamsha Rashi chart is the way the 2 charts integrate and really kind of helps us understand life purpose. And then we'll continue in lesson 10 with kind of integration of the whole course. That will take us out to December 16th, and then we'll be off. I will, for the holidays, I will, it's possible if we need an extra class, I will do it on January 2nd. And that often happens that I just, part of, I don't usually charge, I don't charge extra, but it's just a matter of kind of completing what we need to do to create a sense of completion with the material. So there's a possibility that we may have an extra class on January 2nd, and usually it kind of happens. The new class for January is income, career, and personal finance. It's I have a lot of new thoughts, and I've taught some of this material before, but I actually have a bunch of new material to add on it. So that's going to be starting on January 20th. And then after that, I'll continue with advanced career topics and do this money and career thing lately. Okay. You can always get my book. It's not on sale anymore, but it's good. Okay, I sent you a new version of the PowerPoint. I just added some material last minute that I thought about needed to be in there. There's probably again 2 or 3 weeks of material in the course. So read the PowerPoints. I can't. Sometimes it's more important for us to do the case studies than it is to kind of go through points that you could read in a book or things like that. Okay, so I sent a 6th edition, and the edition really just means that how many times I've rewritten it, so that I keep track of, not sending old editions. So I have to change the cover. So that's what that means usually. Okay. 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 So again, the purpose of this lesson in the context of the course is understanding the evolution of the soul. And I explained that a minute ago in the introduction. It's kind of like Groundhog Day. Do we continue our suffering and difficult patterns that are suggested by the astrology when we're born, or do we become aware of them and transform them so that we're better people, learning to live in more love and compassion and not blind to the way our ego shows up and things like that. So I think this is like deeper soul work. And like I said, we need a language. The problem with Vedic astrology is, we have abstract signs. We have planets in signs, and even nakshatras, and we have aspects, and we have to kind of learn to translate that into English, into something meaningful. And so we have to keep reviewing the languaging, because every piece of information in your chart has some meaning, every degree. And we can, I have a class on Yoga of the Planets from Andrew Foss, where he kind of shows how every degree is connected to some energy point, and we can actually kind of see deep, get insight. So every degree, every aspect, every sign, every nakshatra, is telling us something. It's none of it's random, and learning to kind of translate into English means we have to have more language. Again, core questions, of our life is, why are we here? Why am I suffering? How can I get out of suffering? How can I live a better life? And I keep mentioning Bill Murray, and so you don't have to go over that. Usually our minds are gripped by our patterns, and we're blind to what's happening. We make mistakes. People see us in a certain way. We don't see ourselves. And then we get into some some crisis, and it's usually time, it's usually the Atmakaraka crises that force us to look at our soul and to do something to move out of it. And Atmakaraka crises, which kind of come up in your Atmakaraka dashas, as I've pointed out, they're trying to point you toward enlightenment, and they're trying to kind of wake you up to your blind spots. And so but we can see them ahead of time in the chart, and we can, we don't have to kind of always go through them. Again, astrology is never intended to strike fear into our hearts. It's supposed to bring light. Jyotish means light. So what light can we shine in our charts? This is all material from my book, which you've all read. Hopefully, if you haven't gotten my book, Finding Your Blind Spots, definitely add it to your library for Christmas. There's a problem with Vedic astrology, with our mind, is that we kind of tend to beat ourselves up a little bit too much. Let's call that self-blaming and self-shaming. And astrology should shed light on these patterns so that we don't do that. I mean, it never really works. I think it's just, I don't know whether our parents instilled it in us. And if we have too much Saturn in the first is particularly horrible for this, or Saturn aspecting the first, or conjunct the ascendant lord, or aspecting the ascendant lord. There's just, I'm not a good person. I'm not good enough. And we have to kind of move away from that if we're going to kind of grow and find the bliss. I always reminded you that our consciousness is more powerful than the planets. We shouldn't be victimized by the planets. And I get too many people, oh, I've got Saturn here, and I've got Mars here, and I've got Ketu in the first house, and I've got, I'm doomed. And we were never meant to be victimized by the planets. They're always kind of lovingly giving us lessons. Even Saturn is the good college coach that wants us to win the race, and he'll beat us up, but in the end, when we win the trophy, we're happy. So again, even all the malefics are actually our friends, and we have to understand what they're trying to teach us. And I've given you this technique. When Saturn is in the way, if you're in a Saturn dasha or Saturn bhukti or Saturn return, you have to kind of you can honor Saturn, because he's giving you wonderful lessons, but you also can tell him to go now, because by age 36, and all of you are beyond that, your Saturn matures and becomes an important planet in your life. It brings a lot of spiritual growth, a lot of hard work, maturity, and it's only in our young life that it really can be a problem. But so if it's still plaguing you, you've got to just be aware of its teachings and remind it to go. And we have to always remember to move out of the mud. I mentioned one of my, woe is me, I have this pattern and that kind of thing. One of my favorite spiritual teachers was fond of saying, if you're camping and you go down to the lake at 6 o'clock in the morning at sunrise, and you look in the lake, sometimes, the water's totally still and you can see the bottom of the lake, and then the second you get in the water, you stir up the mud, and it never quite settles down again. You never see that beautiful bottom. But, our spiritual practices are meant to kind of lift the mud in a sense, but mud is kind of endless. If we hook up a water purifier to the lake, there's no way we'd ever get all the mud out. And in a sense, our karma is kind of endless. How many lifetimes have we had? So we have to kind of learn, we need the spiritual practices and the grace to kind of get beyond the mud and stop beating ourselves in the self-blame and the self-shame. I think I introduced some of this earlier in the course. I've refined it a little bit. Each of the planets has kind of a core lesson to it, and this is the evolutionary astrology. We have to kind of look at the planets in a different way. So Mars governs ego, and ego isn't bad, but it's identity. It's how we it's often a mask too. So we have to be willing to see the slippery layers of ego that want us to be right, look good, and be better than others. There's a real problem with Mars when it gets afflicted, and it's afflicted most of the time. Is that it's comparing. It tries to, you get in a conversation with somebody, and you're sharing something profound, and they share something that they try to better you and say, well, when I had that same experience, but this is what happened to me. It's kind of a pointless game. And it's ego. It's trying to kind of be better, and then we get into arguments and we want to be right, and my politician's better than your politician, and I'm right, and I'm not going to talk to you again because you don't believe what I believe. Our whole country is kind of going down the swamp because of that's happening, and the media is pushing that, and it's not true. I mean, many of you are old enough. We grew up at a time when we respected both sides of the aisle, and we just we respectfully may have had an opinion or disagreed, but we didn't stop talking to somebody because they, were a supporter of some politician or the other. There's all these games that the ego plays, and then, Mars is sometimes trying to look good, or, puts on this phony mask, and we hate people that have these kind of false egos. We all love authenticity, and we have to grow in authenticity and be real and not play these games that Mars plays. To me, I've been watching this wonderful old NBC series. It's on Netflix now, New Amsterdam. It came out in 2018. It's about a doctor who takes over the head of a hospital in New York. I don't know if any of you have watched it, but the first episode is "How Can I Help?" and the opening line of the show is this new director, getting all the department heads together and saying, "How can I help?" And the whole show is about going through the red tape and the government regulations and all the problems with the board of directors to really help the patients. It's a beautiful, beautiful show. And it reminds us, why are we here? We're not here to accumulate all the money in the world. We're not here find that ideal sexual relationship, or there are all kinds of things that people get caught up in, or I'll be happy when I have this big mansion, and it's okay to have those relative desires, but we're really here, how can I help? How can I be of service? So we really have to, think deeper. And the highest aspect of Mars is service. It's like the military. Mars governs soldiers, and, exalted Mars sometimes, or Mars in Aries is unafflicted, it's just all about service. How can I help? How am I? And that's what we're here to do. We're not, and so it's a good lesson for Mars. Sun, Sun is also, about selfless service. Ultimately, we've lost sight of, in ancient times, the king of the kingdom who had all the money was really cared about all his people. He wasn't trying to exploit them. He was really, in ancient times, the king was like, the good king. He was caught up in helping his subjects and making sure they were taken care of and protecting them when the other countries came in. And, so the sun also, the highest aspect of the sun, sometimes you see it with people with sun in Aries, is if it's unafflicted and it's the right rising sun, they're really caught up in helping, the idea of the sun wants to help people. And now we have politicians who are into how much money they can accumulate, how can they be right and destroy the other party. And there's all these power trips for self-aggrandizement. And that's, we talked about how a lot of politicians have Sun Rahu signatures in their chart, and it's all about, distortion of the good king. And we eventually have to get back to the good king. The moon, are we willing to be the compassionate mother of the universe, ever nurturing and giving her compassion to the benefit of others? Mother gives everything. I mean, when you really get to know mothers, they're so selfless. And once in a while we do get bad mothers that can be kind of cruel and abusive, and my wife had one. But you know, the essential nature of the mother, you know, is just giving up everything, you know, for her children, and she'll, you know, and it's this ever nurturing, ever, you know, mother gives all. I mean, there's this beautiful archetype of the mother, and it's very beautiful. You know, the other thing is the mind is connected to the mind and to our emotions, and that's what usually, you know, we study that. And underneath um, all the whirling thoughts and the whirling emotions, there's silence, and that's where our own inner divinity is. And ultimately, you know, we have to learn through meditation to quiet the mind and move beyond to our own divinity. Jupiter, are we willing to act justly with good judgment and maintain moral standards, or do we devolve into material wealth and corruption? So, you know, Jupiter in Capricorn, you get, you know, it's very good at making money, but it does so by hook or by crook. You know, when Jupiter is very pure, it has good judgment, it's ethical, it's moral. You know, we see that in Sag, it's particularly strong. Or and the other thing about Jupiter is it's about judgment. You know, do we have good judgment? Do we learn from our mistakes? We like to see Jupiter in the fifth. It's the Karaka for the fifth. We don't like to see the Malefics in the fifth because they cause problems with judgment. We make mistakes a lot. We don't learn from our mistakes. So with Jupiter, we have to kind of learn to stop judging others. Again, judging can be an ego trip, right? I'm better. I believe this, so I'm better than you. I mean, our whole look at Sagittarius when it gets afflicted, you know, dogma. My religion is better than yours, and I'm going to destroy you and your culture because my religion is the best. You know, that's the distorted aspect of Jupiter. It's, you know, I'm better than you because my religion is better. You know, this Jupiter can get distorted very easily. And it creates these false comparisons. You know, I just took an advanced seminar on judgment, and it just was so revealing. You know, there can be this sense of self-righteousness again. My religion's better than your religion. You can separate yourself from others. My politics is better than your politics. I'm not going to talk to you. You know, we have to Jupiter. You know, look at Jupiter in Pisces in Cancer. It just is all loving and compassionate towards other. My mom had Jupiter in Cancer in the fifth house, and um, she um, she was just, you know, non-judgmental, always giving, you know, always loving, just, you know, just never saying a bad thing about anybody. You know, it's just that, you know, that's the highest level of Jupiter. You know, we have to move toward that. Venus. Um, are we willing to be unconditional and loving in relationship and the expression of beauty, or do we move into criticism and judgment and separation from others, not from others, due to our judgment? So again, Venus, you know, think about afflicted Venus in in Virgo, which we're just coming to the end of this week, tends to be very critical. It's, you know, I'll love you if you pick up your socks. You know, you know, it's very critical, and it's very conditional. And Venus in Pisces just flows. You know, love is meant to be unconditional in relationship, and the expression of beauty comes out of Venus because it's just, you know, it flows in love, in that kind of beauty of appreciation of the divine quality of the universe. So we have to kind of move beyond the dark side of Venus, which sometimes gets us caught up in the senses. You know, one of the dark sides of Venus, you know, is, we had a lesson on that in the blind spots course, is addiction. You know, do we want more sex or more food or more, you know, substances, you know, to cover up the lack in our life? And Venus can be a real demon in that respect sometimes. And you know, in our world today, which is caught up in, you know, you're not valued unless you have a big house and you have a big bank account. You know, that's the dark, you know, the dark side of Venus. that, you know, isn't thinking of other people on the planet. You know, we know there's enough wealth in the universe to kind of, you know, take everybody out of poverty, and yet, you know, some people feel like they have to have it all. So there's a dark side to Venus and losing its spirituality in the material world. Mercury, are we willing to support the world ethically with our material skills and create material abundance for everybody in the world? Again, Mercury is a business planet, and when I see people with Mercury in Virgo, and sometimes they're, you know, and if they're good business people, they really care about their employees, and they create wealth for everybody in their company, and they want to share the wealth with others. And then you know, you get all these horror stories of people who are just caught up in the corruption of wealth. You know, we've got all these scandals with cryptocurrencies, and you know, and people get very selfish and corrupt, you know, when they have afflicted Mercuries. And so there's that aspect of Mercury, but we also have, you know, we learned about Mercury Atmakaraka. We have to learn to communicate truthfully and honestly and not spread falsehoods or gossip for personal ambitions. And so, you know, speaking the truth is one of the higher aspects of Mercury. Afflicted Mercury keeps us stuck in analyzing the world and keeps us whirling in our minds, and blocks us from perceiving the inner silence kind of. So, you know, the thing about, for certain rising signs, now Mercury is a really good, important planet for Geminis and Virgos, and they transcend and they spiritually grow through analyzing the world. But for many of the other rising signs, Mercury keeps us whirling and stuck in our heads and blocks us from experiencing our own divinity and things like that. Rahu, do we get caught up in corruption and unethical behaviors for personal gain and self-aggrandizement and stay stuck in ignorance, or do we realize the futility of the material world and strive to allow our Kundalini to rise? Now, Rahu has a very spiritual side to it. Actually, Rahu in Scorpio or Pisces is often obsessed with spirituality, and it can be Rahu in Scorpio, even though it's considered debilitated there. It's actually, we like malefics to be weak. So Rahu in Taurus is a problem because it wants more stuff. My wife has Rahu in Taurus, and I got married and I lived very simply, and now when I moved, you know, I needed a 27-foot moving van because, you know, we have more stuff. And there's always more stuff that we want when Rahu gets greedy, and it just keeps kind of asking for more, and it's never happy. And, you know, Rahu in Scorpio is actually more, you know, actually can be very spiritual, and it's in being debilitated, it actually brings out its higher qualities. And Rahu governs our Kundalini nature, and its purpose is to rise to the crown chakra and find the divine. Ketu, do we realize the purpose of our existence to unite with the divine and help others through selfless service or spiritual wisdom, or do we get caught up in the frustrating web of material success and feel that something is missing? You know, you look at Ketu and Taurus, and those people can manifest lots of money. I mean, Ketu can bring a lot of material wealth, you know, in certain signs, but it's missing its essence because, you know, Ketu does best in Sag and Pisces and Leo and Scorpio, which, you know, where its spiritual nature comes out and its search for God comes out. So one of the challenges that, yeah, we could, you know, someday we'll do a whole course on these couple slides that we just did. The blind spots course, I started to get into some of it. I'm going to kind of review the malefics because they're kind of, you know, we only have time to do so many planets. And to me, kind of the biggest lessons, you know, the malefics are hard because their malefic nature, you know, is sometimes more difficult to kind of deal with. Like with Venus, yes, we have to remember not to have that extra piece of cheesecake and to, you know, to donate to charity when we have abundance. You know, with Mercury, we can, you know, share our business success with others. I mean, those lessons, I mean, they're hard for some people to learn, but you know, Rahu, Mars, and Saturn really, you know, cause the most problems. So we're going to focus a little bit more on them. I wanted to review the signs, and you know, I think this is core stuff from my core classes in my book, but even I forget to remember key words that so as I said, part of our challenge. Any quick questions, by the way, before we go into this new section? Isn't it interesting? So I want you all to kind of look at the planets in a deeper way, which is the whole reason of this whole evolutionary astrology lesson. What are we've all come in with either the darkest part of the planet, or sometimes if the planet's totally unafflicted, which is rare, we have the gift to give to others, but that's kind of what I was trying to get at here. It's it's like Groundhog Day, which was written by this Buddhist man, and he kind of intended Groundhog Day to be about 10 lifetimes and ended up being, I don't know, 40 lifetimes or something. But the whole thing where Bill Murray is this selfish, person who doesn't know how to connect to people, and then becomes this great humanitarian and lover and community leader at the end of the movie. If you haven't seen it, watch it again. It's a seminar. Any thoughts on anything we just discussed? Any questions? Any aha experiences? Do I need to unmute you all? Let's see, hold on. Maybe. Okay, you're all unmuted, so. Okay, well, we can move on. I just wanted to. So part of our challenge, again, is kind of coming up with a languaging. And I actually want to go to the second part of this show. You can, again, I can't go over everything and you can read everything. Certain signs, we always have to pay attention to Scorpio because it's co-owned by Ketu, and Ketu brings in past life suffering. So anytime we have a planet in Scorpio in any of the Varga charts, or any in the Rashi chart, anywhere in the chart, it's going to bring in more past life suffering and difficulties. So you can always remember that Capricorn also brings huge disappointments, grief, and hard work. And planets placed here in a coma and unfriendly and not helpful, and forces us to work hard. So, and Aquarius is also the more difficult place to be for a planet because it's co-owned by Rahu. So there's a lot of past life suffering, and gains often lead to losses. Pisces teaches us to sacrifice 12th house. We have to do service work when we have stuff in Pisces. Leo is always caught between the material and the spiritual. It has both of those signs. Virgo shows where we need to be pure or better to improve. Libra has conflicts in relationship often. Mars owns the 7th. Aries. Gemini needs to be more creative. Anyway, we could read through this again. But I wanted to go over the Achilles heels, which I think are more important. Because it's kind of like when these come up in the charts, in the soul chart, wherever they come up, the Rashi chart, the Navamsha chart, the Karakamsha Navamsha chart, we have to start remembering when you have Pisces, what does it mean? Now, these are connected to rising signs, and so the rising Navamsha, the rising Karakamsha Navamsha chart are going to, tell us something about it. So Jupiter, rising signs, Pisces have problems with finance. It's really interesting. They're just so pie in the sky, humanitarian oriented, that sometimes they have trouble, paying their bills or being practical with money. And so you always have to advise Pisces to kind of, settle down with their money and take some classes on it. They also have trouble with their father usually, unless the sun is really well aspected or things like that, because the sun owns Leo is the 6th house from Pisces. So there's a 6-8 relationship in Pisces. So Pisces kind of teaches humility. It's 12th house. We always have to remember that when you see Pisces in the chart, you have to do service work because it's the 12th sign of the zodiac, and you often may struggle with money, but if you're here to give to others through your service work, and there's this problem with Pisces too in this utopian thinking, and fantasy world. Pisces get into spiritual bypassing and forgetting to look into what's really going on. So, and they can be poor planners too, because they're just kind of like flowing in the watery moment of Pisces. Now, Sag, when it's afflicted, again, there's always a dark side and a light side, and Sag can be too religious or fanatical when Jupiter's afflicted. They can be pushy, problems taking orders. This is, when I was thinking about this, I have a really good friend who's Sagittarius, and I keep giving him projects to do, and I pay him. And the other day I asked him to buy some paint that matched the fence, and I gave him the paint sample. And he when we were reviewing this project to paint, he said, "Oh, I think it should be purple," And he went out and he bought lavender, and like he didn't listen to me, but this is a story of his life, and it's a sad thing. I don't know why. I'm wondering, Affy, why do you think Sagittarius have problems taking orders? Is it Mars owning the 12th?
I have no idea, but when I was younger, I would get offended if somebody was giving order. Not that I wouldn't listen, but I would be offended if the order came a certain way. It's almost like somebody's being authoritarian and, offended by dictatorship and authoritarian type behavior. But I think with me personally, might be, being able to listen to the inner voice, and not being able to really like believe that somebody else has another point of view. And I did that, when it comes to political stuff. I'm having to work harder to see the other person's point of view, and being, versus my own opinion. I'm being much better because I'm working on myself, but I don't know. It could be Mars owning, but
And maybe
it could be
Saturn.
Mars.
I don't know. I was just trying to think of the structure. I wonder if it's Saturn, but something that just kind of hit me because I'm just, I've been working with this Sag person. Anyway, but you're
Because
right. Thank you
the
for
12th
bringing up.
house could be owned by Ketu or Mars. So
Right.
it could be either or.
I think it's the 12th house owning Mars that people just don't like to take orders. Um, Anyway, but thank you for bringing up those other points, being too rational, being blocked by following their inner voice. I mean, Sag is connected to the space element, and it really needs to listen to its intuition for its spiritual journey and not get caught up in too much logic. Because Mercury's, not a good planet for Sag. It owns the 7th. Um, so Saturn owns signs on their Achilles heel. So Aquarius, which is co-owned by Saturn and Rahu, they tend to have self-esteem problems. And again, I know a lot of Aquarians, and they just, there's just, there's that beautiful quality about Saturn sometimes because it doesn't have ego sometimes. I mean, it can have ego depending on other placements, but there's this kind of quietness and the shyness sometimes, and this lack of assertiveness sometimes, and it can be a problem. Some people are able to overcome it with other things in their chart. These are generalizations, this whole thing anyway, but self-esteem problems, not recognizing their own talents, being isolated and depressed, paranoid, fake smiles. Moon owns the 6th, so they tend to have problems with mother, food, nurturing, and things connected to the moon and emotions. So Aquarians are very, I don't get too many of them doing readings. They often feel like they do know it all too, but they um, they're really great beings when if they let their humanitarian and philanthropy blossom. Capricorn, Achilles heel, problems making friends, gloomy, not being a good partner. They all have the Saturn signs always have relationship problems, and with they attract the luminaries, and it's always tricky. Jupiter is the Achilles heel for Capricorn, owning the 3rd and the 12th houses. It's not a good planet to have in the 1st house. They tend to have problems with children and gurus, being ethical in business, lifelong challenges with good judgment. There's always a dark side to Capricorns. They're really good business people, but unless they've got maybe Venus in Capricorn or some other benefic like Mercury, supporting the chart, we have this whole problem about ethics in business all around the world, and it's just huge. No one seems to care. It's about greed. It's not about being ethical and helping other people. Mercury owns signs. Virgos actually have a problem being too emotional. I always think about Hasta. I think that the 10 to 23 degree area of Virgo. They have high expectations. They're prone to depression sometimes, and can be lonely and monastic. And because Saturn owns the 5th and the 6th houses, they tend to be obsessed with cleanliness and perfection. So I've never, anytime you see Virgo in the chart, depending how it shows up, it's always like it's not good enough. They're always
I can
complaining.
tell you that's true of my mother. She's a Virgo ascendant. Hasta is her ascendant. And she is obsessed with cleanliness and perfectionism, almost very militant.
Yeah,
Clorox is her friend.
yes. It's a funny thing, when those qualities sometimes drive us crazy. I mean, we love people who, these people should be cleaners or something like that. Sometimes it's really great to hire Virgos because they just get it right, but they almost drive you crazy, sometimes pointing it out that, you haven't gotten it right. It's like really interesting. But so you've got to watch the quest for perfectionism with Virgo. Gemini, this is an interesting problem because Venus owns the 5th and the 12th house. They tend to be frustrated with romance and investment. So, when the planet, Venus, 5th house is the house of romance, Libra, 5th house from Gemini, but Taurus owns the 12th house. And so, I've taught you, in the basic classes that, when you get these kind of mixed house ownerships like you get with Sag and Mars, yeah, 5th house Lord is great, it's the best planet, but it also owns the 12th, so it brings the baggage. And so you often get, these frustrations in romance and investment sometimes. 5th house is investment, or, performance, just expressing your creativity. A lot of Geminis get sexually obsessed. Lifelong quest for love is thwarted, and there's a continual desire, and it's really kind of a challenge. Now the other 5 signs have problems with the elements. A lot of this material was from a brilliant lecture that Andrew Foss gave, and then I wrote it up into an article in my book, and I forget how brilliant it is. It was Andrew's brilliance from Sanjay Roth, and I've just kind of translated it, but I've thought about it a lot. Aries has problem with the water element, and hence they have problem with the moon, which means food, mother, relationships, and moon, Venus is a water planet, so they just have trouble, with relationships, and unless Venus and the moon are well placed in the 4th, 8th, and the 12th houses. And logically, the 8th house doesn't make sense to me, but that's what some of my teachers have said. Taurus has problems with the fire element, getting moving. I mean, again, Taurus is the earthiest sign of the zodiac, tends to get stuck in material things, holding on to greed. They need to give to charity more regularly. If afflicted, Jupiter, in the 1st or aspecting the 1st, will cause obesity, diabetes, laziness, and self-indulgence. So you really don't want Jupiter afflicting Taurus because it really increases this problem with being stuck and stubborn. Cancer has problems with the earth element, and they have trouble with money and material wealth and saving and holding on to things, and unless Venus and Saturn are well placed. So they need to, again, Saturn is a business planet. We always forget that. Capricorn is a very business sign. They need to actively save money. They need to do earthly activities like gardening and carpentry and aerobic exercise to keep moving. Leos have trouble with the air element. They need water and swimming to balance out their life. I mean, because Leos are very fiery, and you always send Leos to the pool, and they usually have figured that out. They need to go swimming to kind of, get all that excess of fire, or they have to avoid hot and spicy foods. But when the sun gets out of balance, they can be arrogant, vain, boastful, power hungry, and they tend to have relationship problems because, again, there's a strong ego when the sun's afflicted, and so they tend to get out of balance. Scorpio has problems with the space element. Jupiter, governs the space element. It's very good for intuition and meditation, but what happens is you can get too spacey and you have trouble being in the world. So you need grounding activity like weight training. Community is also a way of balancing out Scorpio. People, they need to get out of isolation, too much meditation. They need to be doing community service. So again, good review. Again, I wrote this article in 2016 or something, and it's in my blind spots book. But yeah, I forget how much I really need to use it because it's very core when you're trying to pick up these core patterns for people and to help them. So just a quick look at the moon. I actually need to go into all the other material quickly, but quick look at the moon. We had a whole course on the moon. The moon is so important. And again, as I mentioned earlier, because the moon is the mind and the emotions and the heart. And when that's working, when it's balanced, then everything works. And, I would say 90% of the charts I look at have afflicted moons, and you have to really get people into meditation. Again, remedies for the moon, sometimes getting them into cooking and singing, and moon is connected to singing, gets the emotions moving. All these wonderful singers that they love, we love the emotion in their voices, and so singing in the shower is a good remedy for the moon when it's afflicted. But the moon really always needs help. I'm going to skip this other stuff. This is from my book, but I don't have time. A little bit more on the moon. When the moon gets disturbed by the lords of the 6th, 8th, and the 12th houses. So we don't. The moon gets very afflicted very easily. When it gets aspected by Mars, it creates anger. By Saturn, it creates depression. By Rahu, it creates psychic vulnerability. We get a lot of mental health problems like we saw last week with Charles Manson. We have Ketu connected to the moon. If it's afflicted, Ketu either makes you psychic or gives you too much psychic sensitivity. I have people with Ketu in Taurus where it's debilitated and conjunct the moon, and they just can't function because they walk into a room and they pick up on everybody's psychic energy and it overwhelms them. So it's really kind of interesting. Rahu connected to Saturn and the moon can cause mental health issues, as we saw in Charles Manson's chart. Mars Saturn aspects of the moon can destroy emotional happiness and lead to spirituality. So that's the positive side. I have that. So when we judge the core lessons of the planets, we tend to like Mula Trikuna best, like Mars and Aries, Venus and Libra, things like that, because they're a little bit more balanced. Exalted planets sometimes, depending on the rising sign, can get out of balance. I've told you stories about people, Gemini with an exalted Mars and getting murdered, and I've my friend who even has Mars exalted in Aries as in the 10th house, and she's a general, and she's so accomplished at everything that she does, but she suffers because everybody hates her because she's so good at what she does, you know. So sometimes exalted planets have like too much energy. Little Trachona planets are better. We don't, you know, when planets have low dignity, they're afflicted by malefics, or they're in difficult houses like the 3rd, 6th, 8th, or the 12th. They struggle, and those, you know, when you're diagnosing the dark side of these planets, and trying to help people, you have to, you're kind of looking for planets that are afflicted by malefics and that are connected to the 3rd, 6th, 8th, or 12th houses, or their lords, or, you know, and that can also come through the nakshatra sometimes, for those of you who know that. Again, we learned in the Atmakaraka lessons that the Atmakaraka there, you know, is often kind of dark. I mean, once in a while you get a really strong Atmakaraka and one can learn its lessons, but most of the time the Atmakaraka gets us trapped in the world of illusions, in the material world. You know, the Atmakaraka, it wants to crush our ego, humble us, take away our material wealth so that we grow toward God. And you know, that's again another kind of evolutionary way of looking at the Atmakaraka. And when we look at the Atmakaraka in the Atmakaraka charts, then, you know, we have to kind of remember that these dark energies that come up are trying to teach us to be a better person. And I use the example of my friend who's got Atmakaraka Mercury exalted in the 12th house, and she has great friends, and she quickly loses them, you know, through her ego, and then she's devastated that she lost another good friend, and it's their fault, you know. So, you know, it's those kind of lessons that the Atmakaraka can bring, that kind of, you know, again, can show us the dark side that we have to learn to do better at. So we have to overcome the difficult lessons of Mars and the Sun around anger, of Venus around self-indulgence and material accumulation, of Jupiter around attachment. You know, Jupiter can get too stuck, you know, like it's just, you know, sometimes in the wrong sign, like Capricorn, and the Earth signs like Capricorn or Taurus, or, you know, with Mercury around greed. You know, Mercury actually, the dark side, you know, we said Mercury is the good businessman exalted in Virgo sometimes, but he can be afflicted and greedy also, and just not sharing his wealth and success in business. Saturn and the Moon, you know, can cause problems with addiction and obsession. And, you know, actually Saturn Moon is often a signature for alcoholism, and Rahu is, you know, it's all about obsession. So we always have to kind of, there's this, you know, there's this material spiritual balance in our life that we have to, you know, and material desires are very important to fulfill. And they're part of our life. You know, all my gurus used to say kind of 200% of life. Our society has overemphasized success as being more stuff, the bigger house, the big bank account, and doesn't teach our children to be good people, to be giving, to do service work. You know, we're coming into a whole new generation that doesn't have a clue how to help people, and it's actually very, very sad thing. One of my gurus has a school in India, and they teach people leadership and service work. I always tell people to get their children involved in charity work early. You know, even as a little boy, I used to go around collecting money for, you know, from my religious schools and things like that. I think those values are being lost, and we need both. And you know, and the Atmakaraka often teaches us to you know, balance our lives. Now, I want to review Mars a little bit. Again, we're going to go into the malefics here because I think they cause the biggest problems. And any questions or thoughts about anything that we've covered? You finding this interesting?
Yes, 100%.
It's
Maria, okay, you're shaking your head, yeah. So what I'm trying to do with this lesson is show you that, first of all, astrology is not fortune telling. It's about helping people, and it's about seeing our flaws and how we can become better people, and at the same time not beating ourselves up. So it's very, and all these soul charts are about that. It's like, what does our soul need? Okay. So Mars is, the sun and Mars are very connected to ego, and I didn't do the sun again, but we could often, you can often substitute sun and Mars. Sun has a, if you just finished Secrets of the Sun course, has a deeper meaning in our charts, of course. But Mars, is identity, and identity is kind of the deepest aspect that kind of blocks our divinity, because we often have these false masks. Sometimes we try to be as somebody who we're not. Sometimes we put on these phony smiles, and inside we're not genuine. But the whole point with Mars and ego is that we need to become aware of it, and the biggest block to our inner joy and our inner bliss is hanging on to these false illusions of being a somebody, or sometimes, ego can also being a nobody. I mean, there are self-esteem problems. A weak Mars can like not feel good enough. A weak Sun in Libra cannot feel good enough. So ego is not just the boastful Donald Trump. It's the um, the this, not even being good enough. And both of them are kind of these false shackles of identity that block our own divinity. So we have to be aware of both sides of ego. Again, I just went over this point. Sometimes we think of ego as being big ego. Again, the whole half of the planet, half of the US has trouble with Donald Trump because he likes his accomplishments, and he's very accomplishment, but we tend to not like people who are boastful, and we like people who are humble. The other time you get people who have such low self-esteem, they clean the streets and they can't make enough money to feed their family. So there's this whole balancing act with ego, and we have to eventually feel good enough about ourselves, at the same time have a balanced ego. But there's a very spiritual side to Mars, because in Scorpio is the natural 8th sign of the zodiac, and we transcend ego through spiritual practice, and that leads to bliss, valor, and speech, selfless service, and humanity. So the highest aspect of Mars is service to help others. And again, we're covering. We're not going to have time to cover the Sun, but we're going to cover Mars, Rahu, and Saturn, and review the way they kind of block us.
Harry, I have a question.
Yeah.
Have you noticed whether the affliction, especially when it comes to the malefics of Mars, or Sun, it varies from women to men? Because what you were talking about with the ego and boastfulness, a lot of times it is extremely unacceptable, or the society tells us it's unacceptable when it comes to women. But with men, we tend to, you said half the world loves, I think it's less than half, but loves Donald Trump. But if it was a woman that married Donald Trump, I think the whole world would hate her.
Right. Interesting. Okay, that's an interesting point. Yeah, there's this whole thing about cultural and gender issues, which is actually something that I don't cover as much. But thank you for awakening me to think about that a little bit more. And it is true. It is true. I mean, Mars governs men, and men are from Mars, Venus, women are from Venus, and there is that archetypal nature, if you know that book by Johnny Gray. This is very different than the planet Mars, and you put Venus in Aries and Scorpio, it's almost too out of balance,
And I
but
was
Mars,
thinking of Hillary Clinton's son is debilitated, and
yeah,
she was very much hated despite the fact that she wasn't egotistic. Now I know you're talking about Mars, but I forget where her Mars was. But she was
Mars is
super hated
debilitating
by
in
people.
Cancer with Saturn. It's an interesting point. Yeah, Hillary has Mars conjunct Saturn in Cancer. She's got Sun in Libra, and to me, sometimes, and I think I make this point in a few slides up. One distortion of Mars is that it may not feel good enough, and it may kind of project being too accomplished or too good to balance out how it really feels inside. So one of the distortions of Mars is sometimes projecting a false confidence, or projecting a false or wanting power. In a sense, I think with Hillary, with that Sun, someone just told me actually, they after all this time, that um, Hillary is actually a Taurus rising. I think we've had her as we've had her all kinds of things, but somebody basically after a certain age, they actually finally got her birth data from the state of Illinois, because her birth certificate for the state of Illinois, because she after age 75 or something, they can't it's public domain or something like that. So anyway, Steve Stuckey just found out. I think she's Taurus. I have to get the new date, but the point is that whatever sign she is, although that would make a difference, the Sun is out of balance and Mars is out of balance. The two planets of ego are very distorted, and they come up in a distorted way. And you're right, people don't like strong women. I mean, and people don't like effeminate men. It's very it's very kind of strange. Um, um, Whenever we're looking at Mars, you also have to look at nakshatra placements in the D9, and there's always some distortion if you look closely for ego. Like here's I have to go to my other chart. One of the things that I did is I wrote an article, and I taught this in the blind spots course, and is I looked at Mars by sign, and so I kind of came up with 12 types of ego, just even by sign. And we use the word ego in a general sense, but there are different types of ego, and you could see them by sign, and so you can help people understand their afflictions by sign. For example, when Mars is unafflicted in Aries, one of the things about Aries is that it's very into doing and achievement. I have Mars in Aries, and it's like my whole identity and my whole sense of self-esteem is, how much do I do? How much do I get done? How hard do I work? And there's a kind of a false ego with Mars and ego. It just likes to, it doesn't feel good about itself unless it does a lot, and then sometimes it blows people away by how much it does. So it's about doership, and there's a problem with Mars's doership. I mean, sometimes we hate, sometimes we get these people whose comparison. God, I did this, this, and this, and this, and this, and then what did you do? And they can't match Mars and Aries, and they say, well, I got this much done, and then they kind of like they they kind of, so there's that quality of Mars and Aries with about doership. But you know, Mars in Aries can also get caught up in sexual conquest and be too combative, too rigid, and things like that. I mean, look at um, Michael Jackson's chart. Um, he's Aquarius rising, Moon in the first, again, very connected to children who are very important to him. Mars Atmakaraka in Kritika, conjunct Ketu, um, you know, in the third house, which is a very sexual house, as I've pointed out. And in a sense, you know, Mars is not a good planet for Aquarius. Again, the third house, you know, the darkness of the third house and sexuality and being a predator really comes out there. And it was really a problem, obviously, with Michael Jackson. But you know, it's the Atmakaraka, so he had like major life lessons to learn about that, and he obviously failed. And you know, on some level, you know, you also get the impression that his self-esteem was just, you know, out of balance. Also, we have Sun in the seventh house. Again, we always say planets in the seventh house are kind of dead, and it's in Leo. So there's this like outward, you know, sense of accomplishment, but inside, you know, he doesn't feel good enough. You probably would say, you know. You know, very interesting chart, right? Any comments?
You know, it's
Mars and
interesting because he was extremely loved despite, you know, that third house
right.
affliction. Um,
I think it's the moon. The moon. See, when you have moon in the first house, moon is also love, right? Moon and Venus are the planets of love. Moon in the
right.
first house is a public figure. Moon in the first house is a very auspicious thing to have, and you don't see it that often. But in this case, it's Lord of the Sixth, and you know, you know, he did have the whole issues with this was, it's an emotional imbalance. I mean, they, you know, very emotionally afflicted.
It's also a
And we,
full moon, isn't it, Barry?
yeah,
Or
he
on
has
a
a
full
full
moon?
moon. That moon is afflicted by Mercury. It's afflicted by Venus. Again, we have Gemini aspect. It's afflicted by Mars and Ketu. Again, Gemini astrology, Aries aspects, Aquarius. So he's got that Mars third house. There's a lot of, you know, again, so he's got the ego, he's got both ego planets aspecting. I mean, he has a very amazing, I mean, rock stars, you know, they have these Gandharvan souls. They're incredible. They bring incredible gifts to the planet, but they do suffer a lot. And in this case, you know, he did suffer. Um, you know, he suffered. You know, he did suffer quite a bit. Let's look at Mars and Taurus. Now, again, Taurus is, you know, when Mars is strong in Taurus, and again, it's always afflicted because it's an enemy sign. It's passionate, charming, sensitive, and great at sales. But when it's afflicted, the ego is too caught up in looking good and sexual conquest and may overspend or may be into short-term pleasure or bodybuilding or looking good or obsessed with nice clothes or creating a false sense of ego by looking good. And you know, we look at Arnold Schwarzenegger. Um, and I don't know if any of these things are bad. I actually don't want to judge any of these things either, but I'm just saying it can create an imbalance sometimes. Let's look at Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's a Gemini rising. He's got Mars conjunct Rahu in the 12th house. Now, um, um, you know, Schwarzenegger was very accomplished. You know, his early career was a bodybuilder, about, you know, looking buff. And, you know, it's almost like Mars Rahu here is in Taurus is obsessed with, you know, the ego is about looking good here with Mars and Rahu conjunct in Taurus. And I don't think it's bad. I mean, he used that to catapult into being a film star, and then he did move on to serve his state as being governor of California, but you still get the sense, you know, both the ego planets are kind of out of balance. Is very difficult relationship energy, which is true of Geminis with Venus owning the 5th and the 12th, and how many was it more than more than 2 marriages, or just Maria Shriver, or
No,
was it?
he's just married to Maria Shriver, and you know how
Right.
that went.
Yeah, it didn't go very well at the end, but you know, just major lessons there. His Navamsha chart's good. Mercury and Jupiter in the first. So this is why we can't totally, you know, whenever we look at anything, we better look at a bunch of things, but look at the Navamsha chart. But see, the Rashi and the Navamsha chart have a 12 relationship, Gemini to Taurus, and again Taurus. So in some, his soul was a Taurus rising. So remember, I told you can. This is why I use the South Indian charts. You can overlap the Navamsha and the Rashi chart. So you can put Rahu and Mars and Taurus here with Mercury and Jupiter, and you get that more kind of self-image with bodybuilding much more strongly. The way the two charts overlap here, overlap the Rashi and the Navamsha, and you've got Digbala in the Navamsha chart with Mercury and Jupiter for brilliance, but again Jupiter and Taurus, stubborn, and Rahu and Mars going in here when you overlap them, creating that kind of self-image around looking good. John Denver, another Mars and Taurus person. Can't do all of these lists. We won't get through Saturn and Rahu, but we will. You can read the slides and go through them. John Denver, where's John Denver? I know I had John Denver. Okay, here's John Denver. He's Taurus rising. He's got Mars in the first, and it's retrograde. And I love John Denver. I mean, he was a great singer. Lord of the First and the Seventh. Again, you don't look at, you've got that Mars Venus on the 1-7 axis and the exchange of houses between the 1 and the 7th. And you know, he had a very difficult. He often cheated on his wife on the road. You know, Annie's song, which is an amazing song about his first wife, divorced him, and it was rather devastating. But you can see how we've got Saturn Atmakaraka in the first house there. Again, we don't like Saturn in the first house because it creates self-esteem problems. It probably made him humble. I mean, for a rock star, I think we appreciated that Saturn in the first because there was some humility and hominess in his personality. But on a deep level, I think it was creating self-esteem problems, and then, you know, finding a sexual outlet with Mars and Venus exchanging houses on the 1-7 axis was a way of promoting his ego in conquesting in order to feel good about himself. Again, these, you know, you can read the interviews and the biographies, but you know, you get that sense with this chart. Now, Mars in Gemini, you know, can make one very good at problem solving, could be very good at mechanical engineering or military science, love of learning. That's when Mars is unafflicted. When it's afflicted, we get a lot of nervous energy and fighting and to be clever and getting into a sharp tone. Look at Robin Williams. Robin Williams is Libra rising, you know, very tragic ending, obviously, with his suicide at the end of his life. And, you know, Moon Rahu conjunction can create mental illness. And so we have that in the 5th house, which is a mental house. Comedians you know, got Mercury in the 10th. It's interesting. It's the Atmakaraka. It's in the Gandanta. It does suggest a very troubled mind, and Mars, I think, is really kind of afflicting Gemini here. It's in Rahu's nakshatra, so it moves. It creates a connection between Rahu and Mars, and so this Mars is very kind of afflicted, and I'm not quite. Anybody have a sense of how that would show up in Robin's life? Absolutely brilliant. Comedian, but you know, deep suffering at the end of his life, like, you know, which is what happens.
From what I remember, he felt alive only when he was acting. I read an interview that when he was reading his dosha books and he was doing his voices, she would just ask, you know, Dad, please stop doing voices, just read. So it's just maybe there is discontinuity between his life and his life on stage. It's something to do with that.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, see, Moon Rahu in the 5th is going to create mental disturbance, and again, he committed suicide, which, you know, so, and I think he did this in the Rahu period or the Moon Rahu period or something. It really can't. You can time it when this kind of tragedy happened. I think we looked at it in the longevity course, but we also have Ketu afflicting the chart lord here within 1 degree, and that's in Leo in the 11th. You know, it's you know, kind of creative brilliance, and yet, you know, just there's a lot of problems with the nodes in this chart. Okay. Anyway, I'll let you read the rest of Mars and Ego and the different signs. And you could, I didn't have time to paste in the charts. Maybe if I have time, I'll paste in the charts before I send the PowerPoint again. I may or may not have time, but I will do that. If I can, again, Mars and Leo, we have Donald Trump. Again, but anyway, you can read the rest of them. I have an article in it on my website, and we have done it before. I have a whole, I think the videotape might even be on YouTube, but if you want to study Mars and Ego, it's fine. But, you know, in summary, when you get Mars conjunct Mercury, you get over mental stimulation, aggressive and ambitious, self-centered and ruthless in attaining goals. So Mars, dark side, Mercury and Mars, we never liked that combination. Mars, Jupiter, you know, Jupiter does afflict Mars, actually. We sometimes think they're good friends, but Mars Jupiter conjunctions in a chart will have trouble mismanaging money. Jupiter is finance. Mars Jupiter's conjunctions will create that spends too quickly. Mars Venus, again, you know, passionate on the positive side, quarreling, agitated, wanting to be right in relationships. So we talk about Kuja Dosha in Vedic astrology, which is about, you know, young people. Ego gets in the way of, you know, relationship is successful when you say yes. Mars, when it is afflicted and is Kuja Dosha in a chart, you know, wants to be right, and the ego has to be right and have it their way. And when you're in a relationship, you have to say yes. You know, you can't fight and say it's going to be this way. And you get these horrible Indian marriages where the man, you know, culturally they just, you know, beat their wives, and that also is Kuja Dosha more sometimes. So it's, you know, women, you know, Indian women get really these horrible Indian arranged marriages sometimes. Mars Saturn, this ego distortion, driving others away with intensity. I have a Mars Saturn opposition in my chart, and I don't even see it. It's between the 6th and the 12th house. And my wife is just, you know, I will go at my wife, you know, not in an aggressive way, but just making my point. And again, it's Mars trying to be right, but she says, stop being so intense, you know. Mars Saturn afflictions often create isolation, not good enough. Again, that's the dark side of Again, Mars likes identity. It likes to feel good and accomplished. I've got an exalted Saturn aspecting Mars, and it really hurts my self-esteem. So that's, these are ways that some of the planets can afflict Mars. Mars, Rahu, vindictive, angry, antagonistic. That's always a difficult combination. Mars, Ketu, irritated, quick to anger, negative. Mars, Sun, domineering, self-improvement, fanatic, instant gratification, obstinate. Again, these can show up with Mars in Kritika Nakshatra, and or Mars combust. So, when the planet's afflicted, the dark side of Mars can come out. Mars, Moon, agitated, easily provoked, emotionally disturbed. So, again,
Barry,
Mars, yeah.
doesn't Mars Moon also create a yoga where you can make a lot of money?
There's all these things have kind of, and I pointed out with these yogas, the Mangala Chandra yoga, I mean, in a Mars Moon period, a Moon Mars period, you may make a lot of money if the planets are not afflicted. I mean, Mars and the Moon are they have a funny relation. Don't forget, Mars is debilitated in Cancer, and for Scorpio, Moon owns the 9th house, but it's Bhaudika. So, and I just told you, Aries has trouble with the Moon. It has trouble with emotion. It has trouble with mother. It has trouble with food. So Mars and Moon have this funny relationship. Once in a while, in certain charts, particularly Cancer rising, Mars is the Yogacaraka planet. It can be very, very powerful. And the yogas sometimes can be powerful, particularly for Cancer rising. But, even if you have the yogas, they're often afflicted and they don't fully manifest the wealth. So,
And then as far as Mars conjunct Rahu or Mars conjunct Ketu, one it can be masochistic, the other one sadistic.
I think that's a good way of putting it. Wow. Mars Ketu, has this, usually I always have this repressed anger issue with Mars Ketu. They just hold back their anger and then they explode, and then they no one has any idea where that came from. And these people, I see this in people's charts. They're just Ketu tries to repress the anger, and then Ketu is a fire planet, so it explodes. It's a real problem. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Rahu. Yeah.
I have a question. On the conjunctions, is there a certain degree?
Yeah, by the way, these are conjunctions, could also be association. Association could be planet and sign, planet and nakshatra. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's not necessarily like they're at the same degree in the signs.
Right. Yeah. The thing that we have to learn about Vedic astrology too is, when we learn these connections, it's association. Sometimes it's planet in a sign, planet in a nakshatra, planet conjunct in the Navamsha chart, planet in aspect, planet in a yoga exchanging signs. So we can have, we get these combinations. It's really important as you become Vedic astrologers to realize that some people, when they learn Vedic astrology, they say, oh, Mars conjunct Rahu, I don't have that, I don't have it in the same sign, but you may have Rahu aspecting Mars. You may have, Mars in Aquarius, which is association with Rahu. Rahu owns Aquarius. You might have a Gemini aspect with Mars and Rahu. So you've got to remember, a lot of these things come up a lot more often than you think, because you have to look for them in different ways. Okay.
Thanks.
Good question.
What if Malefic is your ascendant lord, like Mars for Aries ascendant?
The ascendant lord is never malefic for itself. The ascendant lord is always good. The ascendant lord could be afflicted, which could bring out some of the dark lords. But the ascendant lord is always, considered, it's gold. It's the first house. It's very positive. But Aries rising by nature, depending on what planets are afflicting Aries, what planets are afflicting Mars, may have, everybody in the world has some level of ego problem because we create identity to differentiate ourselves. What happens in adolescence is that we create identity to make ourselves different from everybody else. And that's when we start putting on these false masks. And we often carry them our whole life, you see. It's being aware of the mask and wanting to be right all the time and wanting to up one's, I don't know, trying to be better than somebody by like, well, I did this, you know, that somebody tells you this incredible story, you say, well, when I did this, you know, there's this whole, you know, you have to be aware of the dark side of Mars because it comes out, you know, as a malefic very easily. And Aries rising is going to have it too. I've got Mars in Aries myself, and I have a lot of dark Mars. You know, I'm just looking and getting to know it now. It's ugly. Okay, let's move on to Rahu. You know, we have a 20 lesson course on Rahu. It's on sale actually. If you know, for those of you, by the way, who want to pick up my other courses, there's a Black Friday special going on through Monday. So if you buy any canned course online, it's 40% off. Unbelievable. So here's a chance to stock up on the classes of mine that you've missed. Anyways, that's my plug. Anyway, as you know, I don't make a lot of money on classes, and I do it because that's my love. Okay, Rahu. You know, the thing we should Rahu is the you know is so fascinating. You know, Rahu, we have a society ruled by Rahu. You know, it wants more stuff and more fame and more, you know, we buy into television with our actors who have charismatic energy, and we love our gangsters and criminals, you know, on TV shows. You know, The Sopranos was like this huge hit on HBO a number of years ago. It was about gangsters, but we love gangsters. It's Rahu, you know. We love revolutionaries. We love Robin Hood. You know, these are the Rahu figures. And you know, Rahu's so charismatic. You know, you put Rahu in the first house. A lot of politicians have Rahu conjunct the ascendant lord or the sun, and they're just charismatic, and we believe them. You know, and they tell us lies. You know, it's like, but Rahu's, you know, a snake. You know, it hears better than it sees. You know, it's really interesting. Mercury and Jupiter control Rahu. Venus also can control Rahu, but you know, create you know, sensual addiction. But you know, so the good thing about in the True Note system, Rahu goes into Pisces for everybody now on Tuesday, whether you're a True Note or a Me Note person. Jupiter, Rahu will afflict Jupiter now with Rahu and Pisces, but Jupiter tames Rahu's wild nature. I think it may help with, you know, Rahu and Mars is going to, in Aries is more violent, right? I'm hoping Rahu and Pisces will, you know, tone down some of the world violence, which is pretty horrible at the moment. We don't know.
What does it actually mean that it tames Rahu, that Mercury and Jupiter can control the energy?
Well, when Rahu's really afflicted by Mars and the Sun and Saturn, it you know, when it's in those signs, it tends to bring out the darker side of Rahu. I mean, the darker side of Rahu is paranoid, and it's anxious, and it's it can, you know, so there. I mean, we have a whole 20 lesson course on it. I mean, you really have to know Rahu well, but it, you know, the benefics help Rahu. You know, Rahu can be good. It can bring a lot of material gains in our life. It can tame the darker aspects of Rahu. So that's what I mean by taming it. There are a lot of good qualities of Rahu. It's about our material life, but it eventually teaches us that more stuff is not going to fulfill us, you know.
But because I do have Jupiter and Rahu in the same house in the D9 chart. So what does it mean actually that Jupiter can
Jupiter, well,
What affects it?
Rahu afflicts Jupiter, and Jupiter helps Rahu. So,
Yeah.
so this is the problem. I have Jupiter and opposing Rahu, and Jupiter can Jupiter afflicted can be a little bit of a know-it-all, or it may have problems with gurus or advisors. It doesn't want to listen to other people.
Yeah.
So that's the affliction when Rahu afflicts Jupiter. But Jupiter taming Rahu can bring out its spiritual side. Again, Rahu does have spiritual energy. It represents Kundalini energy, and the Kundalini energy going up creates enlightenment. But so often, Rahu is obsessed with sex and money and drugs and all kinds of things. Again, 20 lesson course. We're going to try to cover it in 10 minutes here. So,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. I'm going to have you read through some of this. So the Rahu type, mysterious, unpredictable. Well, what I want to point, I'm going to let you read. If you don't know, if you haven't taken some of my classes, or you have, you can review this material. But Rahu. The points I wanted to make about Rahu is that it's often a phony. It represents the false mask that we put on. So whatever sign Rahu goes into, whatever house Rahu goes into, it often tries to be to pretend that it knows something about those things, but it doesn't. So it this is the whole thing that we learn in the Rahu class is that the mask has to come off. We have to be authentic. We have to kind of show up as who we are. We hate phony people, and Rahu is always kind of phony, and I mentioned to you, I have Rahu in the second house, and I was drawn to being a financial advisor. And at the beginning of my career, I had no degree to be a financial advisor, but I wanted to be a financial advisor. So there's some level of phony mass that happened. Now, eventually, 35 years later, I learned, I know how to be a financial advisor. And that happened a lot sooner. But, at the beginning, it was Rahu was drawn to being some, there's this whole thing, fake it until you make it. Rahu could be that a little bit. And I got out there with my newsletter, and I was just not even aware that, and I made mistakes, but it was just what Rahu does. It puts on this mask sometimes. So Rahu is phoniness, false identity, masking of patterns we don't want others to know about us. We need to tell the truth about our deepest fears, and then we are free. Rahu jams up the whole system of compensation. I mean, the whole Rahu Ketu class, Rahu in the first, I think we had for Taurus or Libra, for a woman in particular, I'm not beautiful enough. I need to change my face. I think we looked at Cher's chart last week, or maybe I looked at it yesterday. Did we look at Cher's chart last week? I think we did, right? Yeah. Cher, if you remember, Cher has Rahu aspecting Gemini, her first house, and her face was never good enough. She kept changing her face because she didn't feel good enough inside. It was like this mask, it was like, on some level, the self-esteem was Saturn in the first house. Also, horrible self-esteem, Rahu aspecting Saturn, trying to mask not being beautiful enough with more plastic surgeries. That's Rahu putting on a mask, Any mask you put on, you still don't feel beautiful enough. I mean, how many plastic surgeries can you do and still not feel good enough about yourself? Did she work on her self-esteem? I don't know. But that's, so, Rahu, the dark side of Rahu, confusion, pretense, masking, phoniness, you always have to watch out for it. Rahu in the first false sense of self, confused. I had an employee who had Rahu in the first, and he just didn't know who he was. He kept trying to find out who he was, and now he's caught up in the whole game that's going on, which is fine. But it's this search for, again, no judgment about that. It's a search for, like, who am I? Let me try being this, because I don't know who the hell I am. It's kind of the search for Rahu in the second, false family appearance, pretending to manage money, but having no idea how to do it. I said I have got Rahu in the second. I started out in my career, with this pretense, and I made mistakes, and it was irresponsible, but that's what Rahu does. And I learned from those mistakes, of course, but it was very painful. I mentioned Rahu in the third house, intellectual restlessness, not feeling smart enough, so trying too hard to succeed. Rahu in the fourth, false about feelings in the heart level. We never, again, if you have Rahu in the fourth, you don't express how you really feel. You have to learn how to be authentic. Rahu in the fifth, projecting who you are in your hobbies and sports and romances in a false way. I'm the, Don Juan, I'm the greatest lover, I'm the greatest sportsman, but it's not really true. So again, wherever Rahu is, whatever house it goes into, creates this false mask and phoniness until it masters those things. Rahu wants, wherever Rahu is, it's what we desire most in this life. We want to master wherever Rahu is. But at the beginning of our Rahu journey, we pretend to be somebody that we're not. Rahu in the sixth, material struggles and problems and complaining about them due to competition at work or health issues. You may be a hypochondriac or prone to impatience with your struggles, and victims are others. Rahu in the seventh, false relationships. You may be a pleaser, codependent relationship, sexually out of balance, involved in a great marriage, but secretly having affairs. So Rahu in the eighth, false trust, getting security from others, unconscious fears and phobias that may seem so real, we drown them in addictives. Rahu in the eighth is the hardest one, because the eighth house is the unconscious, and afflicted Rahu in the eighth really will get into addictive patterns because it can't deal with its emotional things. You often get abuser, abused victims, and perpetrators on the second, eighth axis also. Rahu in the ninth, false about religion and spirituality. Rahu in the ninth is a difficult placement because you can't feel settled about your spirituality, and you're always changing and searching. You're a spiritual shopper, and it's difficult to get enlightened when you're just keep changing and going into something new. You're just restless all the time about spirituality. Rahu in the 10th, charismatic in leadership, but may not, may not be a good leader. It's very funny because sometimes people think Rahu in the 10th is a good position, but a good manager gets in the trenches and works with his people. Rahu in the 10th may have so much kind of self-esteem about themselves, they stay in the office and they say, you go figure it out, and I've seen this, with people. They're not good leaders. They may be charismatic, they may get the job because they have Rahu in the 10th, but they're really not, they're phonies. Again, Rahu's a phony. Rahu in the 11th, phoniness with groups and friends, or has friends that are phony and not authentic, unclear on long-term goals and what they want. Rahu in the 12th, false abilities to surrender and sacrifice in marriage. Again, 12th house can also be about marriage. Again, it's being committed in sacrificing in your marriage to raise your children and continue the race. And Rahu in the 12th tends to get into affairs too much, secrets in life, deep masks, and they hide their business failures and their sexual failures, and they tend to get unethical. So again, there's a whole course on Rahu and Ketu if you need to pick it up. But the thing is that wherever Rahu is, we have to kind of remember there's some level of phoniness and mass that's hiding and we need to be authentic about it. We need to own the fact, we need to be truthful about wherever Rahu is in our chart and actually take off the mask. Okay, Saturn, we've got 20 minutes left. there's this wonderful book called Emmanuel's Book, and she talks about fear. She says, Saturn, fear is this big illusion in our life, and when it's afflicted, it tends to create fear. And to me, it's like this huge block in our lives, because when we have fear, we don't trust in God, we don't trust that we're taken care of, and we buy into our fears. 99% of the things we fear never happen, and yet we buy into our fears all the time, and it blocks us, right? So it's a big crater of illusion in our life, right? And we always have to, say, what is the darkness or fear trying to say to you? What are you afraid of in life? What are you afraid of in yourself? You must challenge fear and ask it what it means to say. As we go into fear with open eyes and open heart and courage, you will see that fear is just an empty room. It is only as strong as your avoidance of it. If you give it power, it takes over. There's nothing to fear in the universe, even death. Rest yourself in the reality of God's eternal, everlasting presence, and know that there are plans deeper, there is consciousness wiser. I bless you with the awareness of eternal safety. There's this beautiful thing when you jump off into a cliff, when you're brave, God will catch you in his net. Fear is a trick, a sham, a sleight of hand. It is illusion. The master magicians are at work demand to see up the sleeve. You are safe, you are safe, you're infinitely safe, oh my dears. It can only make it possible for you to experience the loving, gentle kindness of the universe, the balance and the fairness, the sweetness and the joy. There would never be another moment of fear in your entire lives, and that is true. You can pick up this book, Emmanuel's Book. If you have problems with fear and you have problems with Saturn, you're in a Saturn period, read that every day. You've got it on the slides, but it's really important to realize that fear is an illusion. I mean, we spend our lives fearing this and that, and I'm Saturn Atmakaraka. I've lived my life in fear also, and I'm just eventually you have to kind of doubt the doubts. You have to doubt the fear. Otherwise, it takes over and it blocks life. So Saturn's a big block to life. There's a good side to Saturn, of course. It governs physicality and infrastructure. It's connected to Capricorn and business. It's connected to our physical body. It grounds us in the present moment. It likes exercise and hatha yoga. But it's cold and dry and logical, and it wants the truth and science. The scientific planets are connected. The scientific signs are Capricorn and Aquarius, connected to Saturn, and Saturn is very connected to health. It does well in the 7th house because we know that marriage is a long race, and you want to have Saturn in the 7th house because it means that you'll have a long marriage. Maybe if you're lucky. Saturn archetypes: getting back to the land, finding your roots, feeling the earth, retreating from the city into nature, like a Walden Pond. Less is more, getting down to earth, no nonsense. Saturn takes no prisoners. Saturn loves meditation, solitude, and silence retreats. It likes silence. It does well in meditation, which is the same thing as death. It's an androgynous planet. School of Saturn. What is Saturn really about? Saturn is about the willingness to face the difficulties we experience in life as the karmic outcome of our past action. So wherever we have Saturn, it means we have past lives that we're trying to heal, where we, Saturn is, as we know, is a very karmic planet. It brings up our difficult lessons from past lives, and usually our Saturn lessons, Saturn's never fun. For certain, unless you're, even if you're Capricorn rising or Aquarius rising, even these people, Saturn is the chart lord, and I when I talk to them, they do better with Saturn, of course, But, you know, for Aquarius, Saturn owns the 12th. And for Capricorn, Saturn owns the 2nd. It's a marca. You know, my friend just died. He was Capricorn rising. Saturn's transiting the 2nd house in its own sign. So, you know, you know, it's very interesting. Saturn doesn't take any prisoners. And at the same time, you know, we have to come to peace with Saturn, and we have to learn to be responsible. We need to be responsible for what mistakes we made in the past. And when we suffer from Saturn, whether it's health or materially, it's ultimately trying to move us towards spirituality, which means, you know, if you take up meditation and yoga and if you do service work and help other people, Saturn doesn't become a problem. If you get into the dark side of Saturn, you end up, you know, with lots of stuff, and maybe you're an unethical business person, but you end up, you know, kind of suffering. Can you look at the slides here? I've got a lot of slides. The good karma of Saturn means that we have to shoulder our responsibilities and persevere through difficulties. So again, Saturn forces us to work hard. And if you want to play too much, Saturn's your enemy. You know, life is not just sitting on the beach and sipping martinis and having hot sex in your hotel room. It's you know, Saturn needs to kind of, you know, Saturn means working, helping people, getting through our responsibilities of being a parent. You know, Saturn's mature. It's, you know, young people have trouble with Saturn because they want to party on the beach. You know, they don't want to work and make money. And we have a whole generation lost now that's living with their parents because they've been spoiled. You know, there's a lot of Saturn lessons coming for our millennials, and I see it all the time. Dark side of Saturn: laziness, refusing to make an effort, allowing others to do their tasks, excessive material ambition, imposing our standards onto those in our care. We have good Saturn karma from past duty. We have stability of lifestyle, the ability to gain natural respect of others and rise in position and responsibility. I have an exalted Saturn, it's in the 12th though. Resisting social pressures and remaining true to ourselves and our self-sufficient. So Saturn, when it's strong, it really can know what's right and what's wrong, and it you know, it doesn't bow to, you know, being a chameleon in society and pretending to be something that you're not. Saturn, when it's strong, is blessed with good concentration, capacity to work hard and to realize our goals. So hard work, responsibility, stability, being real, being truthful, those are really nice qualities. We like people with those qualities. Negative side of Saturn, when it's weak, like in Leo and Cancer, poor placement or debilitated in Aries, past inertia may lead to feeling lack of support from others, lack of self-confidence, extreme self-consciousness, self-blame, self-hatred, problems with anxiety leading to health issues, tendency to become a workaholic, you know, having to work really hard, difficult jobs. Challenges of Saturn to uplift and to spiritualize, to exercise whether we're willing to commit to the world and uplift society. Are we, again, that's the Aquarian part of Saturn, right? Helping society, helping humanity. Are we over concerned with duty and achievement so that it causes too much stress in our lives? Have we accepted spiritual responsibility for ourselves and our destiny, or do we complain? So, I mean, the dark side of Saturn is complaining. The bright side of Saturn is like, I've got to go to work and I've got to bring money home for my family, and maybe I don't like it all the time, but I'm responsible and I'm going to not complain to my wife when I come home every day about how horrible work was, you know? So it's different, you know, two different energies. Are you responsible or do you complain? You know, no one likes complaining people. Past karma. Saturn is very connected to guilt, fear, and self-imposed restrictions. You know, wasted energy. Guilt, I have a lot of it. Fear, you know, everybody has fear. We create our own prisons with fear. I just read you that thing about overcoming fear. We have nothing to fear, even death. Saturn creates pain and suffering. Saturn is a karaka for pain. But we have to, when we have pain, we have to feel responsible that it's happening because of something we've done in the past. And then we have to work on healing it and not grumble and not complain. I mean, pain is horrible. I mean, you probably have relatives that are in pain all the time. And I don't, the things that you could say, you can't say anything to help people with pain, but at the same time, there are people that are in pain all the time and they're stoic. They don't share their pain with others and make them feel horrible. My wife has pain, but she doesn't tell me. And I think in some ways that's good because she's not making me misery because of her pain. She's taking responsibility for her pain. And I think that's one of the lessons of Saturn and pain. Guilt. How do we handle guilt and shame? We take responsibility and become mature, and this takes you into the light. You make a mistake and you say you're sorry. You don't hold on to it. You have to clear up past mistakes with others. We all have people in our lives that we've stopped talking to because we've made a mistake and they don't want to talk to us. And do we ever go to them and apologize and say, I really messed up 10 years ago. Will you forgive me? I'm really holding on to this horrible guilt about it. And we don't, right? Do it. Get rid of it. It causes problems, accept your imperfections. We'll all make mistakes. Just move on. There's no punishment in God's world, only that which we're self-inflicting. So we punish ourselves with guilt. I didn't do this enough. I didn't do that enough. It's living in the past. Saturn drags us into the past. We can't live in the past. It stagnates us. It blocks the light of God. So we've got to let go of Saturn. Depression, very common with Saturn moon, loneliness, self-isolation. Got to get out and be with people. People don't feel good. They feel depressed. They stay home. They feel worse. Got to get out. You get people with Saturn moon in their charts. You've got to get them to join clubs and be with people, call people on the phone, and they don't want to do it. But Venus is the remedy for Saturn always. Venus wants to socialize. They can do art. Saturn art is a remedy for Saturn too. Anything. Saturn is the good and the bad parent. Okay, you can read through this. This is a lot of good stuff here. Saturn gets us stuck in the past.
Saturn, when it's out of balance, is it a Vata out of balance?
Yeah,
For example,
when it's out of balance, it creates too much Vata energy, and Vata energy creates fear. So Saturn, when it's in balance, can be a mountain. I have Saturn exactly aspected by Jupiter, and my wife says, God, you're such a rock. I can't believe you're not moved by, you're not impacted by stuff the way I am. But yeah, Jupiter will really help Saturn. Venus will really help Saturn. But when it's afflicted by Rahu, or it's in Aries, or afflicted by Mars, it really can be a bear, and it can get afflicted through the nakshatra, through an aspect,
And how do you pacify that Vata energy, or how do you balance it? I understand you could do certain food, but are there other remedies?
Yeah, they're called courses on this, but pick up Dr. Lad's book, Ayurveda Science of Life. He's got chapters on it. Yeah, it's if you're Vata, you have to slow down. If you rush around like a rabbit, then Vata gets out of balance. You have to get more rest. You have to do more meditation. You have to get enough sleep. You have to, you can't run marathons. Like, if you have a Vata imbalance, you have to do slow exercise rather than running the marathon.
You need routines on your Vata imbalance. If you have a lot of Vata, you need routines.
Yeah,
and warmth. Everything that is warm is also very good, and oily as well, because you get really dry when there is Vata imbalance.
yeah, you can't eat cold cereal and cold milk when you have a Vata imbalance. You have to eat hot cereals and hot soups, no cold foods, no dry foods. There's a whole, Dr. Ladd talks about this in his book, Ayurveda Science of Life. Yeah. So Saturn is ultimately about moving into the present moment. You know, we're afraid of the past, we fear the future. What's guilt? We're guilty about the past. We're afraid of the future. But we have to move into the present moment. We do that through meditation, through yoga. And in yoga, you know, if you've taken my yoga classes, you're totally in the pose when you do the pose. You're not thinking about what you're going to make for dinner, what your boss said at work. You're totally in the moment. If you move into the present moment, you calm Saturn. Tai Chi is good for Saturn. It slows things down. When we look at, again, you can read through all the slides. I have extra videotapes if you ever want to watch them. I mean, again, I'm trying to take key points from classes that I've taught before and embellish them. But the reason we had this lesson was we have to come up with a language for looking at the Rashi chart, the D9 chart, the Karakamcha Navamsha chart, the Karakamcha Rashi chart, because we've got to translate, you know, the Atmakaraka, the challenges of people's lives, the people's journeys. And so we needed to review this material and to think about the planets in a different way. And the planets are always evolving. And so our goal is to really, you know Vedic astrology well, so that we can learn to, you know, really read the DNA of people's lives. And it's quite an art. I'm going to do I'll send you the extra Karakamsha tapes. You really need to watch them, because I can't, and I'm hoping that I am going to synthesize that chart for you. But I'm trying to do something deeper with it than I've done before. It can be very cookbookish. But I think I felt this lesson was very crucial. Any feedback on this lesson? I'm trying to,
It's
you know,
always helpful. It's always helpful to re-review, you know, those points. Particularly, you forget, you know, or I should say, sometimes I focus on the prediction aspect and forget the, you know, the other aspect as well.
right. I think astrology, I like to move beyond an astrology of prediction, you know, which is why I do evolutionary astrology. But some, you know, people come to you because they want to know what's going to happen, but you have to kind of help them understand why it's happening. You know, it's like, why do you have cancer? Because you're holding on to resentment and the past, and you need to let go of that anger. Otherwise, you're not going to heal. You know, what are you angry at? You know, it's like you always have to get deeper. Am I going to be okay? Well, you know, why is this happening? Because you need to heal your resentment, and if you don't heal your resentment, you know, maybe it's going to come back even if the doctors get it. We don't know, but it's all about helping people ultimately. You know, other reactions?
It really helped me. You know that book you mentioned for Ayurveda? Who was the author again? Because I'm finding like
LAD, Ladd, LAD.
oh,
Maybe
okay.
LADD, but LAD, Ayurveda Science of Life, Dr. Ladd. It's a Bible. And it's
Oh.
really simple and it's really easy to use. A lot of Ayurvedic books are not. That book was a Bible for me. It's been around forever.
Oh, okay.
Basant Ladd, Ayurveda Science of Life. Yeah.
Okay.
William, you learned anything? I just tried to cram a lot of stuff into this.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot, but I did learn a lot with the combinations of the planets and the signs. So it really helped me to understand myself.
Wow, good. Thank you. William?
Yeah, I actually watched the PowerPoint that you sent out. I went through it prior to this meeting.
Oh, good.
So I was aware of most of what you were talking about. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. Good. Okay, so next week I'll send you the Karakamsa tapes, the older ones, and they're good. I mean, I've done it twice. The first one is really kind of, all these Vedic slokas, and the second one is a little deeper, and then I need to come up with this. I need to synthesize them. But if you watch the first couple, it will, the basics will get in there, and then I'll see if I can pull the synthesis together. I couldn't do it yesterday. I think it was this Mars Saturn thing was. Actually, this lesson I thought was going to be really hard for me to pull together, but I've been thinking about this stuff for so long. I just really, I just want to go deeper with Vedic astrology. So that's what we did here. Okay, so my dears, have a great week. If anybody, I just got initiated to do these kind of healing blessings. I could do, if anybody would like me to do a healing blessing for you tomorrow, I can do 3 people a day. Email me and I'll be happy to send you a blessing. And you might be able to experience some bliss or some unconditional love or all these nice things. So if anybody would like that, they can email me. Or if you want to tell me now, you can tell me now too. Yeah.
What
Is
time
that
tomorrow?
Yeah, is that a live thing or how do you do it?
I'm just going to do it quietly after meditation tomorrow. So, yeah. It's not, I'm not going to do it live. I'm going to do it quietly.
I'd like that.
Okay. Affy, anybody else?
I'd like that.
Okay, Alice. Okay. I can do one more tomorrow. I can do.
I could use some.
Okay. Okay. So probably I'll do it in the morning, 8 o'clock or something. Let me know if you experience anything, but and if anybody else wants to do it, I can do it the next day. I can only do 3 at a time. So
Do you want us to email you like a condition that we're going through, or?
You don't have to. You could just have an intention personally about what you need healing around. It could be material or spiritual.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it could be like, it can be relationships, it could be money, it could be health, it could be, just I want more spiritual bliss in my life, or, whatever.
Oh, okay.
That's a pretty broad thing, spiritual bliss. One thing that I've been working on is trying to awaken from all this illusion, this worldly illusion, because it's just, to me, this is almost like hell.
Yeah, it's so amazing that you're seeing that. I mean, most people just are caught up in it, but there is a deeper divine reality underneath that, there are great teachers trying to wake us up to. So it's beautiful that you're seeing that,
Well, I'd like to see it because all I see is hell.
Okay.
But I would like to remove that veil to be able to see the truth, awaken to the truth, not just see it, but realize it and awaken to the truth.
Yeah, well, if you want to talk to me on a sidebar, I can get you into some of these programs too. But it's there's always stuff to do. Our spiritual life will handle all the illusions that we just talked about today. We need grace. We need something to kind of get through our suffering. So it's good. It's okay to ask for help too. So if anybody wants to email me, they can too. But I'll the 3 people that requested I will do tomorrow. Okay, and then anybody else I can do maybe Tuesday. Okay. Anyway, have a great week. We'll see you next week, and I'll send you the Karakamsa tapes to study. Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye. Thanks.
Thank you, Barry.